Welcome to Leadership, the Secret Sauce, the podcast where we talk to extraordinary coaches and leaders to dive into the realms of leadership and coaching. We're your hosts, Dave Lipsky and Matt Dodson. So let's jump in with another guest and find out their answer to the question, what is your secret sauce? All right, before we dive in, a special thank you to our sponsor, Character Matters Coaching and Consulting. At Character Matters, we believe leadership isn't just about results, it's about who you are while you're achieving them. Whether you're facing career transitions, building stronger teams, or navigating personal growth, we help leaders unlock clarity, strengthen resilience, and lead with authenticity. Because when your character grows, your impact grows. Learn more at charactermatterscoaching.com. In today's episode, we're going to be sitting down with Richard Boyatzis to uncover his secret sauce. We know you want to stick around to hear it. We're also going to ask him just some questions around a little history. For those of you that are familiar with his work, especially in intentional change, sure you probably want to you'd be curious to know, just like Dave and I are. So, Dave.
Thank you very much. And Richard, thank you so much for joining us. We like to start out the podcast with an energy check-in. So on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being high, what's your energy level at this present moment?
I'd say somewhere between 8 and 9.
What brings you to the 8 and 9 this morning?
What lowers me from a 10 was we went out and had a phenomenal dinner last night, and my wife and I consumed an entire bottle of a Pudding de Montrachet. So I'm a little mellow more than I usually am.
Yeah, we'll build up the questions to coincide with
ramp that up.
Yeah,
right. No headache or anything like that. It's just like at 6:10 when I usually get up around 4:30.
Early riser. Matt, what's your energy level this morning? And did you go out for wine with your wife?
No. I think what has me at a 9, I would say, is my son's coming home from Virginia Tech today, and I'm really excited to see him. And we're gonna just have a great family Thanksgiving.
What program is he in there?
He's in political science. He's a member of the Army ROTC. He's a great
undergraduate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
What year is he?
He's a junior.
So he's already gone through the coming home and using rude words.
Well, he is. Yes, he is also in the Army, so he is very familiar with those. But yes, he does a pretty good job of restraining himself. I will say that. Like, I will give him that. He is. He has a lot of personal self-discipline. Very respectful. We really look forward to seeing him, getting to do things that I usually don't get to do when it's just my wife and my daughter and I. So
that's awesome. Yeah, we used to have this reorientation, re-entry 5-minute conversation with each of my 4 kids before they went into the house from coming back from college, of like, try not to offend your mother, and you actually have to come home at night, stuff like that. So I am coming in at a 9.
Don't use your iPhone at the dinner table.
Ooh.
Yep. Oh, right. So true. If we can get people to sit at the dinner table after they came back from college. So I am at a 9. So I'm riding a high. I told Matt I became a grandfather last weekend. So I'm excited about
Congratulations.
that. Thank you. Balanced out with last night was my late night teaching in the city. So when I come back from the city at night on Thursdays, I pass all the Broadway shows and the things, and I have a little bit of envy. So my mind usually stays there for a little bit. I
envy because you've always wanted to be a singer or dancer on Broadway?
I am. I consider myself like a coaching actor. So I'm not sure where we go with that. But actually, when I teach, I definitely feel like I'm on stage a little bit.
Well, I was thinking immediately, given your height and your long legs, whether or not you were envious about being on the Rockettes.
Yes, the chorus line, isn't that the other one? Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it's between that and playing the center for the Knicks. I could be the first athlete that does both.
Those are 2 very different size configurations.
I suggest you stick with your strengths, really, to kind of go with the theme of the podcast, Dave. Yeah.
All right, I'm coming. I'm
I
coming
remember,
back to my.
at close to 6 feet, and at that time, running around 250 pounds, I wasn't a small person. But I remember when one of my close friends, who was president of Chicago Bears, brought us down to the field to watch the warm up before a game in Soldiers Field, and watching guys like the refrigerator go running up and down in front of you. I have never felt so small in my life.
Mm. Wow.
So playing center means a lot of steroids.
Oh man,
not to say that your show endorses the secret sauce of pharmaceuticals, but
yeah, no,
It's
my
somebody's
coaching
secret
is
sauce.
it's the secret sauce. Yeah, my coaching is definitely chemically balanced. So,
okay, good.
in terms of, I have one question to kick it off, Richard. Is when when you're sitting next to somebody, maybe at dinner last night or a train, plane, automobile, and somebody doesn't know you, and they say, "Oh, what do you do?" How do you describe that to them?
I usually say I'm a professor at Case Western Reserve University. I'm a scientist. If they don't glaze over by that point, then I'll go on to say I'm a psychologist, and I study change my whole life, about the past 60 years. Most people know me for more narrow fields like competencies or competency development or emotional intelligence or coaching or neuroscience. But what I've done in my whole career is, from doing therapy with alcoholics and drug addicts to working with Fortune 100 CEOs, is basically look at how to help people with sustained desired change at all levels, from individual up to organizations, even communities. And so, but
Maybe that's,
usually the only thing they respond to is emotional intelligence.
yeah. When did you realize that I'm really curious about your secret sauce, but when did you kind of realize that there was something about that emotional intelligence that people were really curious about? Like, did it just
Right.
like happen over a period of time and you're like, wow, I'm getting more requests for this. Wow, is this
Well,
the thing?
I went through my PhD program at Harvard, and with Dan Goleman was a classmate. We went through it together. We were both very close with Dave McClelland, who was my thesis advisor, and we used to hang out there, and we used to socialize together as well as do projects. And and we had always stayed quite in touch during the years after he finished, and he was a writer for Psychology Today, then New York Times, and I was running the research company in Boston. He would often call and say, "Hey, what's the latest, I can feature?" So in 95, when that book came out and started to hit the mega bestseller list, I mean, when he's on the cover of Time magazine in multiple countries, it's hitting big. And he called me and he said, "Hey, you're the guy who does this. You're the one whose research I'm talking about. You're the one who's not only studied this stuff, but shown that adults can change on it. Uh, you know, we got to take advantage of this popularity." I had been studying competencies, which are the kind of clusters of intent, an unconscious intent driven set of behaviors that people demonstrate. And people demonstrate these things more or less often. It's not like you have it or you don't. The question is, how often do you use it? I did the first, as far as we can tell, the first competency study in management where we looked at the competencies of individuals against actual performance in 1970. By 1973, Dave McClelland had come out with a key article measuring for competence rather than intelligence that sparked a kind of revolution. And he and I are seen as two of the 5 people in the US who started the competency movement in HR. By then, I had finished my doctorate, turned down a teaching job at Yale because I didn't want to teach. I wanted to do therapy and research. So I went to work for this small research company that I was working for part-time to pay myself through school. And as a part of that, we were innovating in how to do these studies. So by the time 1982 came around, my book came out. It was the first book on a comprehensive competency model of management, from supervisory to top executives, for-profit, not-for-profit, and government agencies, based on data from 12 large organizations against actual performance. See, that's very key, because up till then, people basically looked at correlations. What personality traits correlated with whatever. And correlations aren't causation. So, and when people did some of this stuff, especially in academic research, very often it wasn't against actual output of effectiveness measures, or, in current decades, we use sometimes engagement and innovation, things like that. So I had been doing this stuff for a long time. I mean, we started developing the first competency development based on my intentional change theory in 1979 for the American Management Association, because they wanted to offer an alternative to an MBA that actually helped people become managers, effective managers. And when I got hired at Case and I gave up running the two research companies, half of the market research company in New York and the HR research company in Boston, to become a professor, one of the first things they said is, can you measure this stuff? Because my company had done work for several of the federal agencies to help any innovative university from 1974 to 82 measure whether or not the students are different when they graduate. And then in 79 through 83, I'd helped the committee that was formed in the group that accredits management schools to look at above average MBA programs. And that was when we found that, yes, MBA programs can increase the number of capabilities that predict effectiveness, but they increase maybe 3 or 4 of them, of the 12 to 18 that you might have in a list. It wasn't much given the amount of money involved. And we showed, and confirmed by another research company's findings, that on the whole, above average full-time MBA programs graduated people with less social intelligence than they had when they entered. Now, it wasn't until 20 years ago, and I started a heavy dive into the neuroimaging and neuroscience stuff, that I figured out why. But it's a separate issue we can go into later, or I can do an 8-hour lecture on that right now. But but to go back to the point, so all of this stuff is going on, and we have started at the beginning all these longitudinal studies showing we were actually changing it for 25 to 55-year-olds in a stable way. And so when we shifted in 95, 96, Dan and I working on it, a lot of it was a labeling shift. I mean, it was the same thing I and all these others had been working on, but we just said, look, if 80% of the competencies that we find in every study in 140 countries around the world, all these different organizations, either had to do with what we now call emotional and social intelligence, then why not repackage it? What became very clear, because I had done a lot of hormonal studies, physiological studies, when I was studying alcohol and aggression and working with alcoholics in the 70s in the treatment settings in hospitals around the US. But by the late 90s, it became clear to me that there was something very different going on when people sought change in their brains, and the environment was affecting that. And that's when I teamed up in the early 2000s with Professor Tony Jack, who's at Case, a prominent psychologist and neuroimaging expert. And we started a series of fMRI studies. And that was, and one of the things that became clear, my earlier work on, how the body's stress response, sympathetic nervous system, versus what I call the renewal, the parasympathetic nervous system, showed that they were antagonistic. I mean, you can't do both at the same time. And you don't get any benefit just by lowering the stress level. You just have mild impairment. So stress is necessary. I mean, you can't decide what to have for dinner tonight without some stress activation, but it's not good for you. It causes cognitive as well as emotional and perceptual impairment. The only thing that's good for you is to activate this other competing system. Well, in the series of fMRI studies we started, we showed both with leaders and then with actual coaching interactions that if you activate this neural network which Tony calls the empathic network, is technically the default mode network. It also activates at the same time the parasympathetic, and you get what in my theory is called a positive attractor. You pull people toward the possibility of being open to change and other people. So you can see how in coaching this was a powerful issue, because the opposite is also true, that if you activate a person's analytic network by asking them to set specific goals, which is really bad. I mean, you need it to get certified as a coach, but it's stupid because that's wrong. Specific goals, focusing on the problem, focusing on the negatives, being analytic, worrying about finances, thinking about the ROI, all of that stuff suppresses this positive emotional attractor, which allows you to be open to other people and emotions and new ideas. So what became clear is that although I did a study that Dave Kohler and I published in 1970 saying setting specific goals was important to change, by the end of the 90s, became clear to me that we were wrong. We misinterpreted the data. We didn't look right at the data. And what we now have conclusive evidence from 3 fMRI studies, 2 hormonal studies showing is that if you coach somebody or try to help them, even as a manager or as a parent, to vision, to the dream, to the big sense of purpose and meaning, you open them up. If you talk about specific goals or problems, it goes the opposite. People close down. They get defensive, and they literally, put their fingers in their ears. They're not listening to you anymore. So, and it was in the process of looking at a bunch of these hormonal and neural things in the 2006, 2007 that I remember saying to Dan one time we were meeting in Boston talking that I really thought the cluster of competencies that we had around self-management of emotions were accurately called emotional intelligence, but that there's a different set of neural networks that activate when you're doing it with others. So that's when we started talking about emotional and social intelligence competencies. But these 2 clusters constitute almost everything that differentiates effective leaders, managers, professionals, teachers, physicians, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, Richard, let me ask you a question. So when you are sitting across from a leader and you're coaching, how would that leader experience all of that incredible learning? Like, how do you position that leader to end up going down a good, valuable path in coaching?
Well, I mean, I could say I condense all of my books into a suppository, but that's not really the way the technique.
1999.
Yeah, right.
Shipping and handling included.
Number nine. No, what if I'm in a coaching relationship with them? I will often, especially at the beginning, say, well, what brought you here? And they'll talk about it, but I try not to let that go more than 2 minutes. Because then I say, okay, we'll get to that. But before we do, I need to understand the big picture you. I need to understand like your sense of purpose in life. And they kind of look at me and I say, it's okay. It has to do with the meaning, your vision. And I have a set of reflective exercises. I literally ask them to do as homework or pre-work. And then I ask them if they are still in a loving relationship with a partner to review it with the partner, because sometimes the partner will say, no, you don't really do that, or whatever. And then we start to then talk about, and the key question is this: if your life were fantastic 10 to 15 years from now, what would it be like? So what you see in this question, and I use this, I get my graduate students in my formal classes that I teach are average age 44. And I get them to practice doing this with real people in their lives. But the idea is you want to go 10 to 15 years out because you don't want people to forecast. You want people literally to break with reality and dream, because that puts you in the right part of the brain. Second, you want it to be geared to life, not work. Work is a subset of life. And if people don't have the life part of it together, the work, it has short shrift. It's not sustainable. So when we do the vision, whether it's with the 30 or the 40 or the 50 or the 60-year-olds, we ask them to write an essay. And the essay should include what they see far out as their physical health, their spiritual health, their romantic and family health, their contributions to the community, and their work or career. But the idea is to try to be comprehensive and, in that sense, holistic. Now, sometimes a person goes, bingo, yeah, I would love to be. And then there are other times in which they can't get there. I mean, I've been known to not let the coaching conversation go on to anything else for 3 months, meeting once every 2 or 3 weeks, until I see that they're offering me a vision that their eyes sparkle with, like on your energy, it pins the meter in terms of compelling excitement. So that's the key. And when I'm doing that, I start every coaching session. Tell me about any updates to your vision. Not because I really think there was in 2 or 3 weeks, but I want them to have the vision in mind for the session we're doing. That's the context, not their problems.
Yeah. What do you do with somebody that constantly goes back to that, or it gets sort of infiltrated, or they're
Look,
like,
the
oh,
natural.
yeah.
Right, Matt, that is a superb observation, as a coach, because we all have people who continue to draw back to the negative. That's where their pain is.
Yeah.
And it's one of those places that we see every day, various either candidates or elected political officials playing to our fears around these things. So they keep drawing us back into it, which makes us more vulnerable to their manipulation. But when that happens, what I will usually do is to say, yeah, that's tough, or I can see how that really, sucks, at work or something or other. And then say, but, let's go back to, the big picture, because that's where you want to head to. Solving this current issue is fine, but even if we do that now, if we don't do it in the context of where you really want to get to, we're not helping you. We're putting a Band-Aid on it. So that's kind of how we go. Now, if the person is traumatized for whatever set of reasons, which among executives, it could be, they just got diagnosed with stage 2 prostate cancer or breast cancer, or, their spouses got Parkinson's, or, their company just had a major recall, or they're trying to run a company in a totalitarian state, or where the government has become, very controlling, not in the ridiculous labels that our politicians use in the United States, because, all these politicians who call things that happen in the US fascist or socialist are on the whole absurd, because they've never lived in one of those cultures, where literally I had the CFO of the largest company in Russia in 1992. I can't say which, but the CFO tell me the second day of a workshop, they were brought over under a big Coca-Cola Foundation thing to our university, that she was up all night really disturbed by what I had talked about the day before. And what I talked about was vision. And she said, I spent 39 years being afraid of that. Wow. I couldn't even share it with my brother because he might say something, and the next thing I'm on a train to Vladivostok or the Gulag. So I want to tone down the rhetoric, because people are using it in ways which are ridiculous. But if people really were in those settings, or in hot zones, war zones, or in urban settings where the gangs are using violence, or they have been a subject of rape or assault themselves, they're traumatized. And there, people won't be able to dream easily. So you have to introduce them to it in small doses, what I call introduce the PEA, because their life right now is all negative emotional attractor, which makes sense. The organism has to defend itself to stay alive. What we're trying to do is open the door. So sometimes we'll use a more playful question like, okay, you just won $80 million after tax in the lottery. How does your work or
Mega
life change?
millions.
80 million after tax. I mean, if you invest in a diversified portfolio at Fidelity or Schwab or Vanguard, it's going to kick off 4.5 million a year.
Yeah.
So when people say, well, I'll pay off the mortgage and set up a fund for my kids' college, that's okay. That's the first 2 months.
Yeah.
But the idea is to be playful. A second question we sometimes use if people are stuck on the future is one that pulls on another. Instead of pulling on hope, we pull on another primal emotion of compassion, which is who's helped you the most in your life become who you are?
Mm.
Who are the people, not one person, but who are the people? And get them to talk about those people and those relationships and moments they had with them. It puts them, because of the gratitude compassion link, it puts them back into this positive emotional attractor state. And if you can get somebody into that state in small doses, now they'll revert back to the NEA quickly because it's scary as hell to all of a sudden not feel anxious. But what happens is, like I said, it opens the door. And then all of a sudden they start to be willing to spend more time in this positive emotional attractor state. And as the relationship with you as a coach starts to build, they start to trust that it's okay. You're not going to report to the executive VP of HR or something ridiculous.
Mm.
I think that answers your question, but I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
it really doesn't. And, it just reminds me of this idea around the vision can really pull you. And just spend, I would just say for our coach listeners, the more time that you spend in the vision, the better off it will be of getting the client to describe it in whatever the senses that they can use to describe the vision. If they can say it, it will be even better for them.
If they picture it in their head, like a YouTube video or something. Now, I mean, back in 2003, one of my faculty colleagues, Melvin Smith, had first come up with the idea that what we were really doing by coaching to this positive emotional attractor is what we called coaching with compassion. So since then, we've used that as our kind of theme, and we're using a more Confucian interpretation of compassion. So it's not just feeling for people in pain, kind of hedonic issues. It could also be eudaimonic, feeling for somebody who wants to grow or wants novelty. The alternative, which is what I think most people do, is coaching for compliance. Physicians and nurses do this all the time, which is part of why I think treatment adherence is so low. Parents do it, of course, all the time. Managers do it thinking they're trying to help, but they're not. Again, it's the role. It's like, goal setting is so dysfunctional early in a change process. It's useful way down the road when you've eliminated all the possibilities and you really know what you want to focus on, because goal setting puts blinders on. That's how it helps, but that's also could hurt. The same thing with feedback. Most of the time, what I say to people is, you want to give somebody around you feedback? Don't. They're not going to listen anyway. And the only reason you really give feedback is because you're trying to vomit on them or get revenge. But the real issue is if a person wants feedback, they'll genuinely ask. And it's not like a subordinate saying to the manager, oh, tell me what I should do differently. Because as soon as the manager starts talking, they put their fingers in their ears. So again, this issue is, how do you help people open up? Because if they're not open, the rest of it's a kind of activity with diminishing returns.
Yeah, our organizations are so designed around goal setting and feedback. Matter of fact, often those are the only words we use in HR process from a development standpoint.
Right.
How do you?
Right. And you stop and think that's based on the model that we're trying to squeeze more out of the person. And how is that going to help the person, the human capital, be greater at the end of the performance period than at the beginning? It's not. It's the opposite.
Yeah. So we talk a lot about trying to shift or change to a coaching culture. So if you took out the words feedback and goal setting, what would that coaching culture look like for you?
Okay. in chapter 8 of our 2019 book, Helping People Change, we made this point based on the PEA NEA antagonistic relationship, the neural network in particular, and the hormones. And we said every organization needs a culture of performance. If you don't perform, you don't continue to exist. But they also need a culture of development. Why do we think that? Look at the engagement numbers. You know, if 80% of the people with full-time jobs around the world don't feel engaged in their work, 55% are reporting extreme stress at work, 35% are reporting profound loneliness at work. I mean, you're talking about a motivation crisis. That's why you need a culture of development. So what we said is you want to develop a culture of development that complements the culture of performance. Now, the mistake people have made, I mean, when I got into this field in 67, one of the big things in management circles was the managerial grid, you know, task versus people, and you wanted a 9-9 style. It turns out you can't do that. The human mind can't go there, because if you do development in service of performance, you kill the development. People feel like you're treating them like a cog, and your coaching is being a coaching bully, not somebody that helps. So they have to be separate but complementary. And when you think about what happens in development, well, first of all, people need performance feedback, but don't get into how you're going to change next year. That's a development conversation. So you have the conversations at different times, different months. The development. There are very few organizations that have been able to achieve this. It's really hard. Sometimes an organization has a unit that's done it. The only total organization I know that's achieved this is MD Anderson, you know, the #1 cancer hospital. And now, the truth be told, I'm on one of the boards, so I know a lot about what's going on there, but it's phenomenal. I mean, their engagement numbers are running like 91, 92%.
Yeah.
I mean, even
I'm
in
in
the best
Houston.
healthcare. Oh,
Yeah.
you are? Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So it's very,
I'm down there a couple times a year. And even in the best other healthcare systems, you're lucky if you're running 40%.
yeah.
So,
And Richard, I would just also think with that one, because that company is a great example. And I would also say, when we've asked somebody if they know more details, they would say, well, in this little pocket. But I think if they pulled back and they would say, oh, no,
right.
yeah, we really have a culture of development.
We just had one of the key researchers and practitioners in their leadership institute present at our coaching research lab annual day of discovery 2 weeks ago. And Kate was talking about the different programs. Now, I knew this, but I wanted everybody else to hear it. They have something like 18 different programs, coaching being one, peer coaching is another, mentoring is another, and then there are a variety of training programs and self-help groups and all that. But they're for everybody, from janitorial staff to heads of, oncology.
Yeah.
Everybody in the organization. See, most organizations will do it, but they do it for the hypos, or the top executives. And that's not a culture of development.
Yeah.
I mean, in one of the books, I think it was the 2005 book, Resonant Leadership, I was reporting out a survey they did in Europe, because I spent 20 years on the faculty of ESADE in Barcelona, and a lot of time giving talks and classes at different European universities, still do. And this one group did a survey of 1,800 MBA graduates throughout Europe. Now, 2 years after they had finished. And full-time MBA graduates are notorious everywhere for changing jobs once or twice after they graduate. So the question was, why did you choose the current company 2 years later to work for? And why would you be willing to stay? And when they put all the data together, salary, benefits, compensation, bonus was the 7th reason. The top 6 were a chance to grow and develop, a chance to do new things, a chance to explore. It was all culture of development. So this boils down to a number of factors. Long-winded way, David, to answer your question. One, the organization has to have activities where a person can jumpstart their development. And that's where courses help. The courses need to be offered both live, because we do need humans to talk to, as well as online for convenience. You have to have mechanisms where people can talk to a person, a coach, and in some cases, also a mentor, different role. You also want to have a culture where people get together to talk about things, the peer coaching concept. And then you really want a variety of ways people could look at very specific things, whether it's a skill or, they're worried about artificial intelligence and they want to understand it more, things like that. So does the person feel, here's the ultimate, the litmus test, does the person feel that the people in the organization care about their growth and development? Now, in more financial accounting terms, is the human capital in the organization greater at the end of the performance period than it was at the beginning? Because if it's not, you're spending human capital to get performance, and that's not growth or effective leadership.
Richard, that reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Anderson and Adams' Mastering Leadership. They quoted this gentleman, I think his name's Eric Geiger. He says, and I use it regularly, leaders bring the weather. You don't need to even say anything. I can sense it and feel it, whether you will allow me to take a risk, whether you'll allow me to say something, whether you're for my development, whether you really want to hear what I think, or you just, am I just a cog in the wheel? He doesn't use this whole thing. I'm more elaborating. Am I a cog in the wheel? Am I just like, one more, rung in the ladder in order? Yeah.
The wisdom of that is that, yes, we know that leaders create the climate in the organization, which is more of a contemporary version of the culture. But we've known since 2000, and mostly from the work of Joseph Ledoux and then a number of other neurologists, that humans now telepathically communicate to each other in 8 to 40 thousandths of a second, deeply unconscious feelings, not thoughts, feelings. And you're infecting the people around you. And if you're in a power position, a leader, a parent, a coach, a physician, a nurse, you have more status, and therefore you're more infectious, positively or negatively. And that's happening unconsciously. So regardless of what you think you're showing on your face, that's happening. Now, what became very clear in our research studies, and now we have almost 5 dozen other studies, half of which have been published, showing the quality of the relationships are key, whether it's the relationship with the coach or the manager or your spouse or partner. And when we started drilling down into that in 2007 to look at what are the features, what are the qualities of relationships that are much better? Shared vision, not goals, vision. Shared compassion, you care for each other. And David, you'll like this one, shared energy. You're on the same wavelength. And we all know couples where one person likes to dance and the other doesn't, and there's always conflict. Or one likes to travel and the other doesn't. So shared energy is, are you vibrating on the same frequency? And what we've been able to show is that these characteristics either mediate, transform, or moderate affect personal characteristics like a leader or a manager or a physician or a nurse's or a coach's emotional intelligence or cognitive intelligence in terms of getting to the effect on the person, on the other person or the team or the organization or the community. And when you show this with the multivariate analyses, what it's showing is the more of these three features are in the relationships, the better the link to the outcomes. The less, the worse. And we have plenty of studies showing the link to leadership effectiveness, professional effectiveness, even for engineers, engagement of the subordinates, organizational citizenship of the subordinates, and even product and process innovation, in terms of competitive advantage.
Yeah. When you look at those three areas and you think about what's happening now, what is it time for now? Like with vision, compassion, energy, as you're advising coaches that are trying to make a difference in the world right now, what would you recommend they focus on? What is it time for?
First, and I do this, because I'm doing about one webinar a week for some ICF or coaching conference or association, not to mention these podcasts, but um, first, make sure that you're still excited about being a coach. I mean, I just said this in a keynote at the Columbia Coaching Conference a few weeks ago. Um, what we do is God's work, but it's exhausting and it can drag you down. So the interesting challenge, and interestingly enough, I mean, Zoom and COVID helped us to break free from the ability to do one or two coaching sessions in a day because we had to drive or fly there. Now we can do 5 in a day because of Zoom. But should we be doing 5 in a day? It's a whole nother. So what I say is first and foremost, pay attention to yourself. Your renewal, your excitement, your vision is going to is going to sustain you. And if you're not there, guess what? You're going to infect your clients with your fatigue or your boredom.
Yeah.
So, first, pay attention to your own. Second, realize that when you're doing this, that's what you want to inspire in your clients. You want to inspire hope and compassion and a certain degree of mindfulness. And certainly in North American culture, I would also add playfulness. That seems to be a powerful thing. All of these are very carefully linked to the medical processes that flip these hormones from this negative emotional attractor to the positive.
Richard, you could just sort of add on to this. What do you think? What's maybe a bold idea around coaching? Do you think coaches have really gotten this more vision led? I see it more in
I
even in
think
the
people are beginning now.
yeah, I
Um,
do too.
I when I mean, look, I started formally coaching executives in 1969. I mean, and I started studying helping, which was peer coaching, but then formal coaching in 1967. So it's been around a long time. And by the time I was doing it, um, one of my first clients was the top executive groups at Monsanto in 69 through 73. And I'll never forget, Walt Mahler was there, and he was a retired Michigan professor who had developed the coaching practices survey
Mm,
in the late 60s.
wow.
And what he did was he had people and their subordinates fill it out to see how many things are you doing to help your people develop. So this has been around a long time,
Yeah.
and under the label of coaching. Given all of that, um, in the efforts to certify people to try to increase or ensure quality, most of the time professions will end up institutionalizing mediocrity because they base their models on values. And Joel DiGeronimo, the head of research at ICF, and I are friends, colleagues. He agrees with me. I was a founding board member of the TL Thought Leadership Institute as a part of ICF. So I'm not picking on any association, but until our two studies were published, one in 23, one in 25, there were no studies of competencies of coaches leading to client change published out there. So all the competency models were based on values. The problem with values is while they can be good, they can also be what we call prejudice.
Mm.
And that's where you get into trouble. And I showed in my 1982 book around management that if you asked executives and consultants and coaches what people needed to be effective managers, half of what they identified was relevant when you did the research against performance. 25% was irrelevant and 25% was opposite. When I looked at the competency models of WABC, AC, EMCC, and ICF several years ago, looking at the indicator level, my guess is 22% of the items at the indicator level, not the competency level, were actually competencies that would play out as being effective.
Mm.
So what that means is that we're wasting time training to and testing and assessing people on things that may or may not be crucial. Now, there are certain things in that list that we want to address, like ethics. The degree of ethics never predicts performance. And you think about that. Because if it did, then getting a PhD in philosophy would make you a more effective coach. I doubt that.
Or a pastor. Yeah.
Or a pastor, or a physician or nurse, or a parent.
Right. Oh, you have to
So,
bring that up.
yeah, sorry. So the issue is, but of course we want to teach something about that. But that's a good example. You could teach that in a 30-minute video. Let people take it asynchronously. You want to assess it? Ask them 3 questions. Give them 3 scenarios and say, what's the ethical position? You don't have to require that they demonstrate a bunch of different indicators in audio tapes of coaching sessions, which you pay $1,000 to transcribe and submit, and all this kind of stuff. So some of it is just misdirected and wasteful, but some of it might be wrong. And the goal setting is an example. The fact that right now you can't get certified unless you state goals up front. I mean, when I took my first coaching certification exam, I don't know, 10 years ago or 12 years ago or something like that, I remember went to a testing center in downtown Boston, and I remember on my way saying to myself, remember what we thought good coaching was in the 70s.
Richard, one of the questions we do, like, what if you were to get a coach for yourself today, what would you want?
Well, I have a couple. I mean, it's
tell me what you like about them.
They know me. They care about me. They have watched me and seen me in operation enough to know sometimes the traps I slide into when I'm not being good. I mean, one of my coaches is one of my senior colleagues, Professor Ellen Van Osten, who is director of our coaching research lab. Now, she also happened to be an MBA student of mine in the 90s and then a doctoral student, in the early 2000s. But periodically when we're doing something together, she'll pull me over to the side or nudge me and say, you're slipping into your Greek male mode, which means I'm, getting hot under the collar and combative. Other than my wife, there's nobody else that can do that as effectively. So now, and of course, probably the most consistent and most helpful coach I have every day is my wife. I mean, it's the kind of relationship we have, and we both enjoy that about our interactions. And then I also, Melvin Smith, who is another senior colleague, and the 3 of us wrote that book in 2019. I mean, I would say that's my thing is, do I turn to them if I need advice on something that is emotional, behavioral, or bothering me? That's an example. Now, there have been others over the years, but right now, I can't. And then I have several groups that I would call peer groups. One I call my brain trust, that I go to with research ideas, for them to poke holes in it before I start a new study. And another I go to for kind of behavior stuff, because I think they're a little nicer people. They have more emotional intelligence. I study emotional intelligence. I'm not a paragon by any way, shape, or form. But anyway.
Yeah.
So I think we all need that. There has been a movement in the last 10 years, a big push on supervision and coaching. Now, that's not bad. I mean, during my years as a psychotherapist, every psychotherapist had to have other people they could turn to. But the problem is, if you rely on the supervision, you keep thinking it has to be somehow this top-down model. I contend the most powerful thing we can do as coaches who want to maintain their professional comportment and their effectiveness is to form peer coaching groups. get together with 8 to 12 other coaches regularly and talk about life, love, effectiveness, whatever. Um, that that can help eliminate the need for the hierarchical supervision issue and can keep you with a group of people that you trust. Again, shared vision, shared compassion, shared energy to be able to bounce things off of and to help you with, because there are times in which I want feedback and I want corrective feedback.
Yeah. That reminds me like around like finding colleagues that where you feel like I'm open to your teaching. I'm teachable because that's what I want to maintain long into,
Yeah.
no matter how many hundreds, thousands of hours I'll do coaching. I want to be teachable, almost like soft clay, like plastilina
Oh,
more than
ah,
air dry clay.
I just go back to the notion of saying openness.
Yeah.
If we're not open to new people, ideas, emotions, we're not going to adapt in a positive way. We're going to adapt in a defensive way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you asked me all these questions about secret sauce, which
Do you want to
had
share your
me
secret
really
sauce?
perplexed, but I we're almost, through an hour here and you haven't actually asked me about it. So
We've covered so much
what's the
ground.
deal? Is this just kind of marketing label or what? Why
No,
is
it's
secret sauce
serious. You just
important to
tell
you?
us what your secret.
I want to know what, no. You're not going to get away from this. I want to know why you focus so much on secret sauce. What does it do for the two of you as a
Dave, you want
concept?
to start, and I'll.
Yeah, Matt and I were by the Woodbury Commons, New York. We went out to a restaurant and we were sitting and we were talking about
That's the
developing
one in
coaching.
Nassau County, right?
What's that?
That's the one in Nassau.
Yeah,
County.
this one actually. This is the Woodbury up in Orange County. I grew up by the one in Nassau County in Woodbury, but so I moved up here.
I did too in East Meadow.
Okay, yeah, I grew up in Hicksville.
Right.
I think I had a feeling we were
Two
related.
towns over.
And I also had the Russians come in the '90s to learn about capitalism. So there's some connection there. When I was so Matt and I were just talking, and we were like, well, what do coaches want to know? What would people be interested in? Matt and I both teach a lot of coaches, and coaches believe that there's some secret sauce that coaches have, and the reality is we know that it's not, but it seemed to be a hook. And as we ask each coach that question, that makes them think deeply about their purpose. So it ends up being a purpose question.
So good. So the secret sauce is almost asking, what's your superpower?
Yeah, or what's your purpose? Like, why do you want?
But it gets to purpose and vision. Okay.
Yeah, because the issue really is where Dave and I believe is that the coaches that are really most effective really understand why they want to coach and have really asked some really hard questions around, not because I want to do this as a side hustle,
Right.
but that I really, like you called it God work. I would say it's right there in terms of this has
It's a noble
become something.
purpose.
It's something far more.
Yeah.
And if I really kind of looked inside to say, look, this is why I show up. And I would just say one of our past guests, a light bulb went on when she said, you know what? It was these two leaders that I've had in the past that really turned the light bulb on for me in terms of I want to be a coach. And
One of my former doctoral students, Han Leo, who's now a junior faculty at Assumption College in Worcester, she did her PhD thesis on professional identity development of coaches. And what she found, both in her qualitative studies and then proved in the quantitative studies, is that current people who spend a lot of their time or full-time coaching never started out thinking they wanted to be a coach. That often something burst into their life, whether it was at a moment of a midlife crisis or something where somewhere in their 30s, sometimes 40s, they discovered this thing called coaching.
yeah.
And I remember back in the late 90s, the president of the APA Division of Clinical Psychologists calling me on the phone. It was before the internet and email were popular. And she was saying, I have 25,000 members who are tired of dealing with teenage anorexics, and they'd like to talk to somebody else about something different. And I think this executive coaching is a way for them to use their clinical skills, but with quote unquote normal people and help them. And she was right. It's why so many people who go into coaching come out of teaching or social work or counseling. But a lot of others who came out of marketing or sales or anything else just discovered it. And that's what Han kind of helped articulate. But it was, as you said, tied to the articulation of a new ideal self, a new purpose, a new vision.
Yeah.
Mine happened in the spring of 1967.
So, Richard, I have so many. Dave, I'm going to give you an opportunity. Richard, would you like to answer the secret sauce question?
Sure.
What is your secret sauce?
I think it's my ability to relate to people, which I never knew I had. I mean, I grew up as a geek. I wanted to be in the space program. I got into MIT. My degree was in aeronautics and astronautics. I specialized in control systems of interplanetary vehicles. Fortunately, my parents are immigrants. They didn't have any money to help me. I had to put myself through school. I did enough from playing gigs throughout Nassau and Suffolk County to pay for part of it, and I got some scholarships. But and MIT, and I ran out of money, and they got me a job doing it for Northrop Norair. So in the fall of '66, I'm working in the Experimental Gas Dynamics Research Unit, and discovered that working on spaceships, at that point we were working on boosters, or what became the shuttle, is not as exciting as going into space. And in those days, you couldn't go into space if you had to wear glasses. So I go back to MIT. My fraternity brothers are all, they're going to stay in engineering. I didn't want to do it. I was going to finish. I was only 2 courses away from finishing. I'm much too compulsive not to. I did. I didn't want to work in restaurants like my father and my uncles, my cousins, every other family member on this side of the Atlantic. And I knew my music wasn't good enough to really become a pro. And I said, oh, maybe I'll go into management. It's got to be easy. Look at these jerks we had out at Northrop. There were 2 departments of Sheldons. We were all super smart or scary smart. We're all socially weird, including the managers. And they didn't get crap out of us. So I sign up. I go to this thing they have at the Sloan School where they had faculty describe their course in a few minutes that didn't have prerequisites. In this one course, a young fellow who was finishing his PhD at Harvard in psychology, Dave Kolb, was describing a course in organizational psychology. It sounded like utter horse crap to me. But in the midst of it, he said 2 words that made me run to the basement and get into his class: no tests. Turns out, I found out in my clinical training, I'm test phobic, always have been. So that was the turning point. But that wasn't the secret sauce. That was the turning point. In his course, I did an essay on self, your dreams. And I talked about reading Ben Franklin's autobiography on techniques for self-improvement when I was like 10 or 9. And he had just quoted the same passage on 2 of his article submissions. So, and then I wanted to study how managers didn't help their subordinates. He said there's some real data on their version of MBAs helping or not helping each other. So I said, sure, I'd love to work. I'd rather work with real data. He liked what I did, offered me a summer job. We ended up publishing it. But in the process, he got me into a set of PhD seminars in my senior year. Now, here I am. I'm a senior in aeronautics and astronautics. I've basically studied physics and calculus, 1 course on the Bible that I had to use English. And I'm in a PhD seminar. I did 2 of them with Ed Schein, who became a personal mentor, on adult socialization, 2 with Everett Hagen, who formed the Psychoanalytic Historical Society with Eric Erickson, 1 with Dave McClellan on community development in other countries, a series of them with Carl Swanson and Jack Pugh and the systems dynamics, Jay Forrester stuff. And I found out that as long as I wore my sport coat and tie, people thought I was a PhD student. Now, the faculty knew I wasn't because my assignments had to be written in English, and my English was not very good. I was used to doing formulas. But once I was in class, in the exercises, in the activities, in the assignments, I was able to be right up there. And that was when I discovered, this whole thing of relating to other people. Now, I realized I had it all along. I mean, in high school, I had a band. I was in all these clubs. I always had one, sometimes two, three girlfriends. I was always very social, but it never clicked because everybody else was seeing me as a physics and calculus nerd. So all of a sudden that clicked, and I discovered this whole field of psychology that it was the first time I realized that a person could do work that they loved so much that it didn't matter if they were paid or not. And I think that's been my secret sauce all the time.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. Thank you for that story. I think that's awesome. Dave, I don't have any other questions, but I do want to, I want to know what you've taken away from our time with Richard. We want to respect his time as well.
Sure. My reflection very briefly is talking with Richard. I've had the privilege to do this a couple of times. As it's a fabulous history lesson in our field, and it's also a way to peer into the future of what's important. And what is wonderful for me is the importance of purposeful, of focusing in coaches on being able to, have their mission, manifest in the work that we do, and how so many of the things that we pretend are important get in the way. So we have work to do.
What you didn't mention is artificial intelligence. And let me just throw in something.
Yeah, please.
Nikki Terblanche wrote he's a good friend of faculty at Stellenbosch on. He's the first person that actually developed AI bots in coaching and has done research on them. But he talked about in an article that came out in Jabs 2 years ago or last year, how it doesn't help to be afraid that coaches are going to be replaced because what fundamentally even more sophisticated AI does is it replaces part of the process, but not the human vibe. And what we showed was that in one of our fMRI studies, sitting and writing your vision did not activate all the same parts of your brain that talking to a coach did. So artificial intelligence is changing the world. But remember, it's changing in an analytic way. I mean, they have an avatar of me now, along with 3 other faculty. You walk into my management school, and you can ask us, life-size, anything about our work. And I did recently, and I even asked it in 4 other languages to do it, and it answered. And one of the things it answered better than I would have, but it's all analytic. It's not interpersonal. So I would say to coaches, look at artificial intelligence as a way to be curious. Think of it as something with your clients to help feed their curiosity. But don't ever think that it's going to replace a human interaction. And in this week's cover issue of The Economist, they call it the relationship recession. They're right. I've been saying this for now 40 years, that the relationships are suffering. So what happened with COVID? We all cocooned. And because of the arousal of our neuroses, we're still doing it. What happened with, iPhones and screens and computers? We all think Facebook friends are really friends. It's not the same. And now artificial intelligence, which is a powerful analytic tool. In one of the articles in The Economist is, my new partner is a model, is an AI model. But that's not going to keep you warm at night. It's not going to help you when you're scared. And it's not going to burst your heart with love. So I think that to focus on the relationships is both what the coaches need to do with their clients, but also what we have to encourage the clients to do in their lives. It's not just an analytic process, it's an interpersonal one.
Mm.
Sorry,
Yeah.
you didn't ask that question, but I just
Yeah, no, that's really good. A lot of our listeners, they keep asking, and we keep bringing it up. Also, to sometimes dispel some of the fear
yeah.
around it. Yeah, you know, as you were talking, Richard, one of the things I thought of was when I was in graduate school, and we asked a prominent CEO in the Bay Area how he got to do the Transbay Terminal for his company. And he said, he looked at me, he said, you know, Matt, it took me 25 years to become an overnight success. And that's the story that I think what you shared that I think our listeners would really need to hear. But I think also the thing that I took away was the deep friendships that you have that you built over time. That is the real lasting piece. I think that and that was certainly one of my takeaways. And then the idea around staying teachable, even decades into your profession, of just stay, because I think it's a mark of humility. And I really appreciate that. I appreciate you spending the time with us. So
thank you, Matt. Yeah. David.
Yeah. Dave, I will just say we want to make sure you know about our show sponsor, Character Matters Coaching and Consulting. That if you are interested, we encourage you to look at charactermatterscoaching.com and contact them for your organizational needs. David, Richard, it was a pleasure spending the time. I hope you all both have a blessed Thanksgiving. And until next time. Thanks for listening. If you love this podcast, please share it with another coach or leader. Make sure you go to the show notes to get all the resources from today's episode.